Hey there, I'm meteorologist Hannah Fink, and we now have another update from the National Hurricane Center. This is our most recent update from 7 o'clock this evening, Central Time. And then we do see some development happening with this broad area of rotation that is currently located off into the eastern part of the Gulf off of the west coast of Florida. So it's still at 25-mile-per-hour wind speeds, but pressure has dropped. It was originally 10-15 earlier throughout the day. Today, it has dropped to 10-13, so that is showing signs of possible strengthening. And then movement is northwest at 5 miles per hour at this time. So this is the newest update from the National Hurricane Center. We now have a medium chance of development in the next 2 days as well as the next 7 days. Both percentages have gone up by 10%. We now have a 40% chance of development within the next 48 hours and a 50% chance of development within the next 7 days. So we're going to keep an eye on it, but this is what we currently know about this tropical development in the Gulf. It's still broad and unorganized, but it is now a surface low. Originally, earlier in the day, it was in the mid-levels. Well, when we want to see the possibility of tropical development, what we need is surface level. What does that mean exactly? Well, in the mid-levels, we have surface level, mid-levels, and upper levels. We need to get all the way down to the surface if anything is going to develop into a tropical depression or into a storm. So we finally got down to that surface level, and that is where we're seeing that organization beginning to take place. Now, where there's still a lot of uncertainty, but the one thing we do know is tropical moisture will take place and move into the Fox 10 viewing area, bringing heavy rain at times during the end of this weekend and into the early parts of next week. And another thing on top of that, this environment is seeming to be quite favorable for organization. As we can tell, we are seeing that increase in development with each update from the National Hurricane Center. Now, one thing I want to point out, currently, there's no wind shear in the Gulf. Now, I'm going to let this back up so we can see it. It's currently moving forward into Tuesday, which we will get to that in a minute. But this is a current look. Wind shear is used to help disrupt the organization of tropical systems. We don't have any of that in the Gulf right now, so that is actually not helping us out in this case. That's why we're seeing the organization take place. But into the later parts of next week, we slowly start to see some wind shear forming. This may help us out, and that's why some models are showing different scenarios on where this system could move. But as you can see, it's not a lot of wind shear, so it may or may not help us out. We'll know more as we get into next week, but as you can see, based off of the color bar there, we're only in that moderate level. We want to see that yellow that is starting to form over the Big Bend of Florida there on Tuesday. But the other big thing we're going to be tracking is our steering pattern. So currently, I reference this as the battle of the high pressure systems. We have that high pressure system. That orange shading is ridging of high pressure or sinking air. Sinking air also disrupts organization. We want that, but right now, it's playing tug-of-war with the system. That's why it hasn't really moved off the west coast of Florida or off the west coast of Tampa since Friday. It's because these high-pressure systems are currently playing tug-of-war with the system, so it hasn't really moved. But as we go into next week, this high-pressure system that is off to our west, is currently in the area of Louisiana right now, moves into Texas and into the central United States. Well, as that moves and as that lifts, our tropical system or potential tropical system could possibly move towards the north or northwest. That's that dipping right there. The high pressure system moves into the central United States. This one over here really doesn't strengthen. The high pressure system that moves into the United States, that one is likely to continue strengthening. So that high pressure system ends up winning the tug-of-war battle, which is why it allows that potential tropical development to move toward the north, northwest, or even the west. And now I'm going to explain why it could move towards the west. So because it starts to strengthen, we could see the effects of that high pressure system going into the later parts of next week. You can kind of see the outskirts of that high pressure system or that ridge kind of come into play, and that's why it could actually move towards the west. So it could keep it in the Gulf depending on how fast it moves and the organization of it. So we're going to be keeping an eye on it. That's why we currently have 3 scenarios on where it can move, and we're also seeing that on our spaghetti plots as well. That ridge of high pressure will continue to strengthen as we go into next weekend. So this is our current spaghetti plots. You can see there's not as much certainty as we were seeing earlier. I wouldn't even say certainty. They were a little bit more of an agreement, but as this low pressure is still trying to organize, we're still not going to know really what's going to happen until it hits that organizational phase, and then a center will possibly form. That's when things start to become a little bit clearer. But right now, you can see it can either have a northwest or west shift, and some models are actually starting to go more towards that west shift at this time. Earlier in the day, it was more looking northwest. Now some of them are starting to lean towards the westerly shift there. Now overall, this is the current setup. We have those 2 high pressure systems in place playing tug of war with the area of low pressure that is trying to develop into something tropical, but it's still very broad and it's still disorganized at this time in the eastern Gulf. One thing we know, again, it's going to increase tropical moisture levels, which will bring heavy rainfall concerns to our area and portions of the Gulf Coast. And the question will be, will high pressure keep it in the Gulf, or will it allow it to move northwest and possibly impact us? Those are going to be the leading questions. Is this high pressure system going to help us out in the coming days? So if this does become a tropical storm, the next named storm on the list is Bertha. And we already had Arthur earlier in the season, and here's what we currently know. Scattered to numerous storms start to develop starting tomorrow, which is Sunday, and into the early parts of next week. Stronger winds possible, especially near the coastline, which means higher seas across local marine waters, and then high surf and increasing rip current risks. Again, that is going to be the main concern as well, besides the localized heavy flooding that could come from these heavy downpours. But what we don't know is, will it become a tropical depression or storm? It has a better chance than it did yesterday, but there's still no guarantee that it develops into a named system. Where will the center ultimately form, since the low is quite broad? The center could develop in several different locations. Even a shift of 50 to 100 miles can significantly change where the heaviest rain and strongest winds occur. And then where exactly will it track? Forecast models generally favor a north to northwest motion, but eventually that track will depend on the strength of the nearby high pressure system and any approaching trough. And then the small changes in the steering pattern will determine who sees the greatest impact. So we already went over that, but let's look at our current local forecast going on at this moment. We have been adjusting our rain chances over the last couple of days, currently increasing our rain chances for Sunday, Monday, as well as Tuesday. Sunday, we have about a 60% chance for showers and thunderstorms. Monday and Tuesday looks between a 40 and maybe even a 50%. This could increase in the coming days as well. And then our wind gusts are already starting to pick up. Now, this is the graph model. I'm sure you've seen it on social media already. I'm not going to show the actual graph model because it is showing a very, very unlikely situation. It is the outlier currently. That one has a hurricane forming. I'm just going to let you know that now. Do not believe it. We do not know what's going on at this point. If anything, models are hinting more at a tropical storm than an actual Category 1 hurricane. But we do know we will see some local impacts regardless of where it goes or what it turns into. And going into Monday and Tuesday, we have about 15 to 20 mile per hour wind gusts. But going into Tuesday afternoon, we start to see those wind gusts increase to about 25 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts, maybe even 35 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts going into Wednesday morning, so the overnight hours then. So definitely gusty winds will be a huge thing we have to deal with, especially because that means our rip current risk is going to increase. So tomorrow we have that low risk of rip currents for Sunday, which is July 19th. And then Monday, we have that moderate risk of rip currents at our Alabama beaches, but a high high risk of rip currents at our Florida beaches, then a high risk of rip currents for Tuesday, Wednesday, as well as Thursday. Would not be surprised if we saw some double red flags, especially on Tuesday and even possibly into Wednesday, just because it is going to be southeasterly flow, which we all know whenever we have southeasterly flow, that makes a huge concern along our coastlines. But one thing we keep talking about is, depending on where this goes, is depending on the impacts, and one of those being the rainfall forecast. We can see about 7 to 10 inches of rain if you're located directly in the center or where the center is trying to develop. But currently for us, we're seeing about 1 to 2 inches across the area, but we could see localized heavy downpours of about 4 to 5 inches depending on where you're located. The highest rain chances look to be a little bit closer to the coastline at this time compared to our more inland areas, but we can see about a half an inch to an inch of rain located there. But this is currently our setup on what we know at this time. There's still a lot of uncertainty, still trying to figure out what's going on. As of right now, what we know, a broad and unorganized low has formed at the surface, and we are seeing a favorable environment for development. We've already seen a little bit of strengthening just in the pressure drop we saw compared to this morning. So we'll keep you updated. Please follow me on social media, meteorologist Hannah Fink. I've been posting periodically throughout the entirety of the weekend. As we get into the work week, Chief Meteorologist Jason Smith, Matt Barentine, Kelly Foster, and Nicholas Herbosa will also be posting updates as well. We're here to keep you safe. We're here to keep you informed. We're also here to answer all those questions, because with social media, things can get a little complicated and sometimes scary. I'm here to tell you what you need to know. We'll have our next update going into tomorrow morning when we have our most latest National Hurricane Center update, and then also the weather reconnaissance or hurricane hunters will be flying into this area tomorrow afternoon and into possibly Monday morning as well. We currently have 2 trips scheduled to figure out everything. It'll give us a little bit more certainty on what the system is trying to do and if it will continue strengthening or not. But for now, stay with us on air, online, and on social media for all of your tropical updates and what you need to know to stay prepared and weather aware.